thanks for joining us this morning. I know it's a big day for you guys. We just had that press conference downstairs. I thought it went as well as you guys could have expected it to go. There were some good questions and some good answers, and I thought that we got there. And I guess the first thing, Danny, is if you can, as much as you can you kind of take us through the process of selecting Rick as the coach? How long of a process was it? I know that there was a little bit off and on. You were traveling a little bit, stuff like that. Yep. But how much of an off and on process was it? And I know you talked to a lot of different people, and what ended up landing you guys right on.
Yeah, well, we met with different candidates. Yeah. It wasn't something that we just gave Rick the job. We wanted to go through with him and all the others the same process, so it was fair for everybody. In Rick's case, the fact that he's an ex-Flyer, the fact that he has a connection with fans is an added bonus. But to me, it didn't play into the decision. He was clearly the best candidate that checked all the boxes that we were looking for our coach. I don't want to say names or
sure,
like that, but he went through the same thing that everybody else did, and we were really blown away by everything. Like the teaching part of it was a big one for me, and the communication were two areas that I think was critical for us taking the next step and guiding a lot of our young guys and young prospects coming and helping them taking the next step.
How do you when you look at Rick's career? I mean, he has the experience and the knowledge as a legacy player here in Philadelphia, but he has the experience as a player and to use that brain and to use that as coaching style. But he also has his experience as a coach, and building and learning on those experiences over the years. How big was that for you to have kind of that double-edged sword to say, hey, I've got the best of both worlds?
And the other part, too, that I would add to it is having had the chance to be a teammate of his and learn from him. I played with him and I trained with him when I was starting in the league way back then. I saw firsthand how this guy would not leave any stone unturned.
Right.
He went above and beyond. If anything could give him 0.1% more, he always said everything adds up. And he would go. I remember, back then, like starting to look into the yoga, the stretching. Yeah. Nobody did that back then. Every little thing that he could get a small advantage, he would be all over it. And in talking to him, that was pretty cool. Is now he's doing that as a coach. He wants to use all the tools. He keeps talking about using all the tools. He mentioned it in his press conference today, when it comes to analytics, nutrition, how you treat your players, sports science. He wants everything. He wants all the information. If it helps a little bit, it adds up. And that's one of the things that I was really, really impressed with him. Yeah.
And Dan, I wanted to ask you, since nobody really got a chance to ask you, you weren't part of the press conference,
which I liked.
Yeah. but you hear Danny talk about these things, right? He talks about all of these aspects of what makes Rick the right choice. A lot of them are hockey related. You have to look at it from a different perspective, obviously from the business of running the entire company that runs the Flyers. What was it about Rick that impressed you that was maybe a little bit different than the X's and O's of a hockey coach that really made you say, oh yeah, this is a guy we want to make the investment in to lead us forward?
Well, remember, I've said this consistently when we've gotten together, I started this by being a fan, watching these guys play as a younger person and then following Rick's career throughout as he moved around as a player and then moved around in his coaching career as an assistant and a head coach. I think what I'm going to echo back to what Danny said, that we all agreed that this needed to be a process where everyone was open, meaning Danny, Keith, myself, open to really understanding what qualities the candidates brought and to evaluate it as objectively as we could. And it was easiest for me to do that because I didn't have the hockey experience. I didn't play with them. I didn't play hockey. But I chose to look at it as from a corporate perspective and also as a fan. And the boxes that Danny talked about from a hockey perspective, I was able to check from a business perspective, the ability, the way he is comfortable with the fans, the way he is comfortable with the media, the way he has such a passion for Philadelphia. So while they were checking their boxes, I was able to check mine as well. And I have to really, I've been waiting for this opportunity to do this. When I first came into this, I was honest with you guys. I was honest with Danny. I was honest with Jonesy that, look, I'm a hockey fan. I have so much to learn. And I'm really excited in the last 2 years. I've learned a lot of hockey. I'll never be able to comment on a player or a trade or whatever it might be, other than to say, can we afford it? Are you sure it's what you want to do? But Danny painted a vision, a multi-year vision. And that vision was, he chose the word rebuild. And he said, this is how we're going to go about it. We're going to make sure we build cap space over the next couple of years. Check, mission accomplished. And we're going to have to make some difficult decisions around players that we really like, but will give us the flexibility to build over the coming years. So I say that for two reasons. One, I don't know that, I hope he gets the applause he deserves for really delivering on his commitment to do this the right way over time. But also, I hope we as fans, we on the business side, appreciate that this will take time and that we're comfortable that the early boxes of the rebuild have been checked.
I guess my next question then, really for you, Danny, is when you look at making this decision,
the coaching decision.
the coaching decision, yeah. Obviously, I thought this was the most important thing you said in the press conference today, and maybe got lost because it was right at the beginning. But I think that there's a narrative out there that this changes the way you guys, the plan, right? And I think that you made it important. I think it was important that you said it didn't change the plan, that everything is still kind of on the same thing going forward. Can you kind of address that? Because so this is still part of a rebuild. There isn't some sudden, we brought in Rick Tocchet, now we're going to be pushed to be a contender this year right away. None of that's happening, right? That's
absolutely
the decision was all tied into that still,
absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. And first of all, I have to say, Jonesy and I are very fortunate to have, Dan and Brian Roberts behind us, supporting what we're doing and supporting our vision and our plan. But you're absolutely right. It's not changing. It's one of the building blocks towards where we want to get. The exciting part with Toc is that he took a Tampa team in his first coaching gig that was rebuilding, and then the next job in Arizona. It was a tough lineup. It was an organization that we're probably looking to pick first overall, and he made them competitive. He grew that team, and he worked with young players, a lot of teaching, a lot of time with them. So that part really excited me, and sometimes we focus on Toc, the player. We focus on Toc, the fact that he. Had that quick turnaround in Vancouver, the 2 Stanley Cups in Pittsburgh with that team, the 4 nations. But for me, really, the most impressive part of his coaching stint was what he was able to do in Arizona. And, people might look at it quickly and say, awful record. They only made the playoffs, once in those 4 years. But he made that team competitive, and that's really impressive when you dig into it. And I've spoken to some players that were on those teams, and they said we had no business, being in the mix to fight for a playoff spot. But he's like, Toc made us believe that we could. So, part of, to go back to your original question, that's part of the plan. It shows that he can work with the teams that where we're at in our plan, and we also believe that he can be part of the next few steps when we make the playoffs and we become contenders and we aspire to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, that was my next question. Actually, was really about, you mentioned free agency. How important is it to have a coach that guys will say, hey, I want to come and play for him? I know it's important, but there's another side to that coin too, where you could have a coach where maybe guys don't want to come and play for your team. Yeah. And I think when you look at Rick Tocchet, I think it makes it a pretty easy draw.
Yeah, and he's been around, I think it was mentioned in a press conference, he's been around a lot of high-end players. He's developed relationships with those guys, and it's so positive, the reputation that he has with top-end guys, and they all speak. They all talk to each other, and that spreads the word. We're already hearing rumblings and, agents calling us excited that we've selected Tocchet as our new head coach, because they know they have a lot of players that want to play for him.
And you know what? From my perspective, you guys are going to figure that out. Where to spend free agent money as we have room under the cap, and finally we're getting to that point. What I was really impressed with is and he looked at individual players. I know he didn't say it at the press conference, but it was fun for me, fan hat, business side hat, to listen to these guys talk about some of our young promising players that he thinks he can have a real impact on, not only their individual skill set, but also their ability to make other players better. And for me, that's exciting, because I believe we have a really strong core of young guys that are ready to be developed and nurtured.
This next question is actually for both of you. I don't know whoever wants to answer it. And I know you guys don't talk about coaching contracts because you don't have to, but there have been reports out there about what this contract looks like. I'm one of the ones who put that report out. What makes you willing to make more of a longer-term commitment for a coach in a league that has a short shelf life for coaches? I think the average coaching tenure in the NHL is like 2.2 years or something along those lines. To have somebody locked in for a more longer term, what does that say about what your vision is with Rick, and giving him the time that he needs to make this team the way you want it to be? So
I'll be interested to hear what you say, but from my perspective, and I think Danny and I are aligned here, and Jonesy as well, I believe in the plan. And hopefully the fans are getting to the point where they're believing in the plan. It's not a quick fix. We're not going to take a shortcut. So we were really concentrating on finding a coach that we believe could not only help us through the next 1, 2, 3 steps of the process, but will be the right person when we get to that point. And so that's from a hockey fan perspective. From a business leader perspective, I believe that if you find talent with different skill sets, and that talent feels really confident that they're going to be part of the team, that their input is trusted, and that they're going to be valued, they maximize their potential. So I was very comfortable with a longer-term contract for Tocchet, because we are going to continue on this plan. These guys are going to be here. We're all going to work together to get to our ultimate goal of being a perennial contender.
And I think I support that, and I think it shows. You asked the question earlier about the plan. Does it change anything? I think this should show everybody that we're committed to the long term with the plan. It that's why we're willing to do it, because we believe he can attack different stage of our plan. And that's another proof when people are questioning if we're skipping steps or trying to get ahead of ourselves. We're not. We have a long-term plan, and he's we feel he's part of it.
Last one for me, guys, but just when you look at your team, you got Rick Tocchet, you have an off season, you have a little bit of money to spend. When you take a look at the fall as you move into the season, what can you tell the fans, saying, yes, we think we're a playoff team, maybe we're the 8th seed, or no, we don't know the answer to that yet?
We don't know the answer to that yet. We have a little bit of wiggle room, more than we've had the last few years. We won't be able to, check all the boxes that we want to check as far as, improving in certain area. We'll see what's open. It's going to be a value play again.
Yeah.
We're going to try to bring in some players to help us to take the next step. We're going to be very careful, but we might be able to plug a hole or two moving forward, and we hope that makes us a better team. Now, I don't know, how far that sends us, but the plan is to take a step forward and be a better team next season.
When you were talking to other candidates, and I don't need you to identify anybody, but just as a general question, was there any thought when you were talking to them in your mind at some point, you sit there and go, maybe this person could be benefit to us in another way? Tocchet's going to be the leader in the clubhouse here, but are there other other people that you've talked to and go, oh, maybe we could find other roles for that person within this organization.
Absolutely. And you get to learn more. There's guys that really opened our eyes and was like, okay, all right, now, maybe you can help us there, or maybe that candidate is not quite ready, but might be ready in another 5, 8, 10 years. So you gather a lot of information on how certain coach do certain things as well.
Really cool. Really good stuff. Last thing I wanted to ask, because I know that this is another narrative that's out there, and I want you guys to address it, because it's a thing that maybe in the past was something that was always a Flyers thing, that, oh, you bring back a former Flyer. And this is what you guys, Jonesy's a former Flyer. You're a former Flyer. Now the head coach is a former Flyer. And I'm of the narrative, I'm of the mindset that that narrative doesn't really mean anything, because what does it matter where the player played? If that person can come in and do the job, it doesn't make a difference if they're from here or not, right? But when you hear that criticism, how do you address it? Like, what do you say back to that? Because, I mean, you mentioned there's a bonus in the fact that he knows the city, knows the fan base, and knows the organization the way it's run. But what do you say back to that when it's an upfront criticism before we even see step one?
I would say, why should we limit ourselves to only candidates that are not ex-Flyer? You look at, like, when it comes to this, like we were in this situation. The fact that Rick had played for the Flyers, when I was looking at the coaches and we were talking about coaches, had nothing to do. He was clearly the best candidate out there.
Right.
And you look at some of the best coaches in the NHL at the moment. 2 of them are still playing this. There's 6 teams left alive in the playoffs. 2 of them are ex-Flyers.
Yes.
Yeah.
We could go Montgomery. Look at the job he's done to finish the season in St. Louis.
Yeah.
Clearly becoming an elite coach. Also, he's an ex-Flyer. So it just happens. And I don't know if it's because this organization, the way you're raised in this organization, they create people that can be in those leadership role, I guess. But I would say, why should we limit ourselves to just the outside? Rick was the best candidate, had nothing to do with the fact that he was an ex-Flyer.
Of course.
And you know what I say, as from the business side and as a fan, embrace it. Embrace it. We got great talent, coaching talent, leadership talent coming in. Let's have fun with a member of the family who went out and learned and did great things, and now is coming home to fulfill the promise of this franchise.
I want to add something to that too. Like, when I came here and I joined the Flyers, I was fortunate to play for this organization. This is still how I feel. And one of the first thing that was said to me by Mr. Snyder was, once a Flyer, always a Flyer. You know that, know that saying, and it's something that I still tell our guys. And when we have to trade a player away, that's always one of the lines that I use. You're always going to be a Flyer. You're always welcome back here. There's something special about this organization that I haven't felt. I played for a different organization. This is one of the strongest bond to be part of.
And you reminded me, that was going to be my last question, but you reminded me of something. When you just said,
he gets on a roll. He always gets on a roll.
He's on a roll. Because he said when he signed here, and I wanted to ask you this, because the year you signed here, the Flyers were coming off of their worst season in franchise history, right?
Yeah.
And you talked a little bit about, on Bundy's question, when he asked you about Rick being an attractive coach to free agents. What was it for you back then that made you choose coming to a last place team to turn it around versus you could have gone to other places that were more competitive teams at the time? And why do you think that translates to today's player wanting to do the same thing?
And I don't know how other players view it or approach it. I approach it kind of the same way I'm doing now. Like, in my mind, I was looking at where do I have, what's the best plan where I have a chance to win a Stanley Cup. And when I looked, and you talked, this team was in last place. Yeah. But then, talking, there was Paul Holmgren at the time, it was the GM, and he had Mike Richards, who was, on the cusp of, becoming the player that he was. And playing against him, I knew. Jeff Carter
Yeah.
was part of that crew, and he was about to become, the player that he became. Braden Coburn had just been traded. You had Upshaw that was also part of that young crew of players. That same summer, a couple days before free agency, he went out and acquired Kimmo Timonen and Scott Hartnell, Jason Smith, and Jeffrey Lupul. So now you're starting to look at all that, and then you have guys already on the team, Simon Gagnon, Mike Knuble, and Marty Baron in net. And I'm like, this team is not a last place team. This team is going somewhere. They're building to be a Stanley Cup contender. Now, we got close. We never won it, but all my years in Philadelphia, we were in the mix. We were a contender, and that was my approach then as a player. Kind of the same thing that I do today, in this role.
And hope free agents look at it the same way.
Hopefully, the same. The free agents, will see it the same way.
especially next year when there's so many of them out there.
I got one last question, actually. Sorry, guys.
Oh, you both see.
You can give me shit now. It's all actually, now you made me forget almost. Damn, we'll forget my question. The draft lottery. Your experience with that this year. What are you looking at with that 6th pick? I know you've got a lot of draft capital, Danny, in terms of what you're doing. A lot of fans are asking about that. What are the prospects with that pick and your creativity or vision with maybe what you can do with that?
It's exciting. I can tell you that much. In that spot, we're starting to figure out the players that will be in that range, the 3 or 4 guys that we'll have, and that's what we're doing. We're breaking them down, but we're not forgetting that with all the capital that we have, there might be an opportunity to move up if the door opens. If the player that we feel is there might be there a few rungs back, maybe we move back. Maybe we use some capital to try to move up from the back end to have another pick. I don't know, maybe top 10, maybe top 15. It depends because you can't do it alone. You need a dancing partner. But we're looking at all options. It's all on the table. Maybe we end up picking with the 7th picks that we have in the top 48. Maybe we just stand pat and we pick. But we're exploring all options.
You got to be excited for this. Like, this is your off season, right? I mean, in a lot of ways.
This is where it begins.
This is a big, part of the plan that I explained to Dan when I started we said the next 3 drafts for us will be the base for the future of the Flyers, and the start of it was the Mishkov, Bunk, draft, and then we ended up, there's a lot of good players too when you look at Bjarnason and Zavraga in that same draft, and then after that, a little later, Barkey, Knuble, Chirnik were also part of that draft. That's still high-end prospects for us. I know they're not all going to turn out to be Flyers, but that was the first draft. The next one was the Luchenko, Berglund, and Gill. They're still, really good prospects, coming up that we hope will play. And then this draft this year. So we'll have a collection of prospects coming, and that'll give us the chance to either, be patient, let them keep growing, or, we might package some different things to try to get a free agent, or not a free agent, but a real player. There's so many options that it opens up. But those 3 drafts we felt was going to be the base for the future of the organization.
So, Danny, also, I feel like in a couple of the trades you made where you were able to get a first-round pick, you also got some players that fit into that prospect.
Absolutely.
They may end up being really good players.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of those guys is we saw him briefly last year, but Grans, when he came up. I mean, being patient with, the Kings kind of gave up on him. They didn't see where it was going. 6'4" right shot defenseman. It takes time. And we saw last year, we just saw the tip of the iceberg, but, next year could be a big year for him.
Yeah.
So you guys want to bring me back to be like a co-host?
Look, you're asking questions.
You're asking questions. Now we've done our job.
Yeah, that's right. We can walk away. This could be the Dan Hilferty show. That's
no,
right.
we don't want that.
You need one of those. Gentlemen, thank you both for really do
Thanks,
appreciate
guys.
stopping by.
Really
You have to make one more promise to me, though, Dan. You got to make one more promise. You got to get Rick to come on the show with us as soon as possible.
I'll do what I can.
come on, we
we couldn't get him take because he was going to NBC, and then we realized, well,
and he's got to travel.
getting Dan and Danny, it doesn't get any better, not for us.
No, I'm sure he will. I'm sure he will.
So we really thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, guys.
I appreciate it. Thanks for all
your
you do.
support.